I didn't plan to tell this story. In fact, I probably shouldn't. But sometimes the only way to shake something from your mind is to speak it. So I'm going to tell you everything, because I need you to understand why the rain terrifies me. I wasn't always afraid of the rain. There was a time when the gentle patter on a metal roof felt soothing. But that changed. Everything changed. A few years ago, I worked with a nonprofit in the mountains of Nicaragua, in a small city called Esteli. I helped run a clinic, mostly for patients who had suffered trauma. Physical injuries weren't all they brought in. There were deeper wounds, too. Ones that only showed up when you sat them down and asked. It was there, at that clinic, that I met him, an old campesino, who came in with his daughter, his guilt heavy in his voice and his eyes hollow. He was haunted, though I didn't understand it at the time. He came in one late afternoon. I remember his hands, gnarled, calloused, gripping a worn walking stick. His daughter had dragged him in, gently but firmly. He wouldn't have come otherwise. When she left the room, I finally had him alone. He was uneasy, embarrassed. He told me only a little, that lately he'd been plagued by anxiety, by a weight he couldn't put into words. He wouldn't say why, but his eyes, they were bloodshot. And the skin under them sagged as though each sleepless night had left a mark. For days, I tried to coax him to talk. Then, finally, he began. About 10 days ago was the first rain. He described that rain. Short, sharp, sudden. A downpour that caught him on his mountain home. He had climbed up, preparing his small house, anticipating the usual dry season. But the skies opened. The rain pounded down relentlessly, longer than he expected. He stayed under his roof, watching the sun. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. He said the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, as though someone or something was watching him. He called out, expecting other farmers caught in the storm, but no voices answered. The only thing he heard was the incessant drumming of rain and his own shallow breathing. After that night, he slept, but only to slide into nightmares. He told me about a dream where he wandered in the forest at night. In that dream, he came upon a pig, a chancho, and then blood. He raised his hand, or rather, something in his dream raised a hand. A massive, hairy fist that slammed down on the pig's skull. The sound, he said it was like a rotten watermelon, crushing. The pig twitched, spasmed, then lay still, lifeless. In the dream, he tried to scream, but he understood, in that moment, that it wasn't him doing it. Some other creature, something huge, powerful, unknown, was hunting in the forest, and he was just a watcher. He grew more terrified as the dreams deepened. He said he began to dread sleep. When he told me this, I'll admit, I didn't believe him. I was a rational person. Mental health was my job. To me, they were just dreams. Nightmares born from stress, guilt, isolation. So I gave him the clinic number, told him to call if things got worse, but I left it at that. He looked disappointed. I could almost hear him thinking, "You don't believe me." But he didn't argue. He simply nodded, squeezed that worn walking stick, and left. A few nights later, I was in my apartment, lying awake, listening to rain drip off the zinc roof. The sound should have been comforting. Instead, it made panic twist in my chest. I decided to leave. I couldn't stay in the mountains if whatever haunted him might come for me next. So I fled, stumbling down the mountain in a villager, kind, gentle, took me in. When it reached the top, it paused. It looked out over the mountains. Through its eyes, I saw Esteli. Then it climbed down, dropped to the forest floor, and walked straight toward me. My heart pounded. I couldn't move. I tried to call out, but no voice came. It kept coming, deeper into the darkness. Nothing. But I felt it. Something watching. Something waiting. I've moved since then, far from the mountains. I stay as far away as I can from rainstorms now. But sometimes, when I hear the first drops, or when clouds roll in and the sky darkens, I feel my skin crawl, because I know that thing in the forest isn't a dream. It's out there. And if the rain comes, really comes, then maybe it's finally coming for me. Next time you hear thunder or see sheets of water slamming against your window, don't just think it's just rain. Think of what might be watching. Think of what might be climbing. And pray you never feel those hairy fingers wrap around a tree. Because once you know, you can't unhear. And once you know, you'll never sleep the same. I used to think Niagara-on-the-Lake was just a postcard come to life. Little stone buildings, lantern-lit streets, the gentle breath of history in every corner. But that beauty hides shadows, secrets that linger long after the sun sets. And I found myself drawn to them. When I first arrived, I walked along Queen Street, past old inns and theaters, not imagining that behind the charm, there was something haunted. I arrived just as dusk settled. The town's warm glow felt soothing. Gas lamps, old brick, wooden signs creaking slightly in the breeze. But as I strolled, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. I was being watched. On a ghost tour that very evening, the guide told us about the War of 1812. How in 1813, this town was burned, soldiers died, and the land soaked in blood and fear. He paused, his lantern swinging, and said softly, "Some of their spirits never left." I laughed nervously, but in the thin evening air, I heard what sounded like distant gunfire, or maybe my mind playing tricks. Later, we walked up to Fort George. It's rebuilt now, but the ground still trembles with echoes of the past. I felt it, a chill, like a presence pacing beside me. There were stories. The ghost of a young girl, Sarah Ann, said to skip between visitors, tugging at coats, playing peekaboo. At one point, I swear I saw a flicker, a pale silhouette near the old officer quarters. Concrete walls, moonlight, and a heartbeat. I held my breath, wanting to turn, but too afraid. We ended the tour at the Old Angel Inn, the kind of place that looks cozy, but smells of old spirits. The guide told the tale of Captain Colin Swayze, a British officer who hid in the basement during war, waiting for his love. He never made it out. They say his ghost still lingers. Doors swing, glasses move, A low whistle echoes through the empty corridors. I watched as lantern light danced on old wooden beams. I could almost feel his breath, hear his longing. As I walked away, I passed the Shaw Festival Theater. The guide whispered that the theater has its own ghosts. Performers and audience members long gone, caught in eternal rehearsals. Staff once saw an apparition vanish mid-scene. Others say props move on their own when no one's watching. Inside, I imagined a ghost light on stage, a single bulb glowing, waiting for a phantom encore. I shivered, feeling the weight of every performance ever given on those dusty boards. On the courthouse grounds, things get darker. The building, old and imposing, was once a courtroom of fear. People report sudden temperature drops, a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Some say the ghost of Judge Edward Campbell still haunts it. A man who once warned the cold stone walls would be his death. I traced my fingers on the railing. Goosebumps rose. I looked up at the windows, half expecting to see a figure watching me from the darkness. Walking further through the town, I heard about an orb, a blue light that floats in the night, near the old post office. They call it the Watcher. Maybe a former constable, forever circling the streets. Unseen yet present, locals tell stories, not just of war ghosts, but of restless energies clinging to the stones, the rooftops, the empty alleys. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with tales of ghosts, but the darkness felt different now. Heavy, expectant. I stepped outside, lantern in hand, walking the silent streets where history bled into the present. At the old Angolan's door, I stopped. My breath fogged in the air. Suddenly, I felt a pressure, like someone standing just behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just shadows dancing. Then, a whisper, a soft voice, almost a sigh. Stay. Heart pounding, I backed away, my lantern trembling, casting wild shadows on the stone. Every step felt like I was under someone's gaze. I left Niagara-on-the-Lake in the early morning fog, but I didn't leave the feeling behind. The war ghosts, the orbs, the sorrowful soldier, they stayed. Now when I close my eyes, I see lanterns swaying, hear footsteps in empty halls, feel breath on the back of my neck. If you ever walk those cobbled streets by moonlight, listen closely. You might catch a whisper from the past, a fading shadow on the wall, or the faint, haunting tune of a heart that never let go. I grew up in a house ruled by silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses on your chest, that listens. There were rules nobody ever said out loud. Don't speak when he's drinking. Don't cry where it can be heard. Don't be a problem. In that house, silence was how we survived, and my brother James understood it better than anyone. He watched me like he was guarding something fragile, something important. He used to whisper to me, "As long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you." I believed him. I needed to. One night, something changed. It wasn't loud, just the refrigerator door left open, its yellow light spilling on the linoleum. A bottle rolled. Glass clinked. It was small, stupid. But then the house moved. I felt the weight of something there in the doorway. James moved first. always protective. He stepped in front of me like a shield, without looking back. And then there was a crack. Not a shout, not a crash, but a brittle crack, like a branch snapping in winter. He fell, blood at the corner of his mouth, a red thread through his skin. He pushed me back even as he collapsed, in a voice too soft. "I'm here, don't, it's okay." That night, everything went quiet. Too quiet. Morning came, but James was gone. No ambulance, no calls, no frantic parents. His pillow was still warm when I pressed my face to it. But that was the only proof he'd ever been there. Then came the posters, missing in bright red letters. His school photo, taped to telephone poles and grocery store walls. But in the photo, it looked wrong. The smile was small, the eyes too bright. I traced the posters with my fingers when the wind tugged their corners. I pressed my forehead to the paper and whispered, "Come back." But the paper just trembled in my breath. Weeks turned into months. The posters faded. The neighborhood stopped talking. But I never stopped waiting. One night, I was awake as usual, and I felt it before I saw it. The mattress dipping, a familiar weight, the room growing cold. I didn't blink when he spoke. "Saki," he said, my nickname, the one nobody else used. He sat at the edge of the bed, no glow, no hollow edges. He was just him. The same blue water eyes, pale skin, clothes from the poster, dirt on his knees. I reached for him. He took my hand. Cold, solid. "I'm here," he said. "I told you." After that, he was always there. Not in the way people are. He never walked through doors. He just appeared. In the chair, in the hallway, beside me when I slept. Strange things happened around him. Phone screens froze. TVs flipped to static. The fish tank pump stopped until the water lay dead and still. The room turned cold. I learned to read the house again. I put my hand on the wall to feel for tremors, the subtle pulse that said he was nearby. I moved. My new life started. New house, new people. But James came with me. He sat in corners with no dust, learned to exist in silence that wasn't filled with fear. My new parents never saw him, but they felt something, an unease, a presence. They slept with lamps on. They closed doors softly, as if afraid to break something. One day, I tried to make him visible to them. I held his hand and walked past my mom in the kitchen. The light dimmed. The radio crackled. The window frosted over. My mom scrambled away, her face hollow. He stayed beside me, cold, quiet, watching. There was a night I remember when we were driving home in a storm so thick the windshield was a wall of white. The heater was blasting, but I felt frozen. Then I saw him, in the rearview mirror, his pale eyes staring at me through the glass, as if the world outside was nothing but a reflection. The car jerked. The radio screamed in static. Something invisible hit us, like air or fear, or something older than night itself. When I woke, I was drenched. He was holding me, arms tight. "Shh," he whispered. "Everything's all right." He pressed his cheek to my head, and the cold was there, but not the sharp sting. It was softer, like memory. Eventually, I understood. He stayed not because he had nowhere else to go, but because I had nowhere else. He was my protection, my shield, my ghost. One night, under a bruised sky, he held my hand, and I set it on his chest, where a pulse might have been once. It was cold. "You can go," I said. He blinked, and for a second, I saw him as a boy. Then he changed, not flesh, but weather. He turned into cold air, into new snow. He didn't disappear. He just became less. He let go first. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching him fade, as the lamp hummed back to life. I live now. I wake, eat, walk, work. The fear is softer, but I carry him still. In the chill that comes with a storm, in the tremor under my palm when I touch the wall, in the silence that watches me. Sometimes I say his name, James, and sometimes I feel a light touch on my shoulder, gentle, precise, familiar. I don't always answer, but I know he's still here, protecting me in the way he always promised.